Hi, Clinton.
Hi, Gloria. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Doing okay, thank you. Doing okay. That's a beautiful day.
Yes, it was.
Did you take a vacation?
In about a week and a half.
Oh, okay. I knew it was. Oh, it's coming. Good for you.
How about you?
I did some things during the summer. Yeah, I went and I went down to visit my family in the south. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, the
nice.
South in the summer.
It was hot.
Yes. I don't go away in the summer.
Oh, I don't like coming back to New England and
So
after I
we're
went to a nice warm.
gonna take our cue from George now.
Oh, I guess we're starting.
Okay.
Hello there.
Good
Hello.
evening. My name is Karen Lee. I'm from the Community Preservation Committee. Tonight's meeting is the annual public hearing, the first part of the meeting. A slide presentation will be prepared shortly after this introduction. If you're interested in I got thrown off here. I apologize. Public comments will be taken until October 31st and you may mail them to Community Preservation Committee, City Hall, 36 Court Street, Springfield 01103, or email to cpc@springfieldcityhall.com. And I will turn the meeting over to our chair, Bob McCarroll, who will start the presentation. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, welcome everyone. This is the beginning of the 7th funding cycle of CPA in Springfield. And we look forward to any comments regarding those needs or opportunities that you feel that CPA can address. Obviously, CPA can't address every issue that the city has, not potholes, not schools, not police, but we can help in a variety of areas. So tonight's format is we will have a slide presentation about what the Community Preservation Act is, if you're not familiar with it. We will then have public comments for folks that are in the audience. If there are any, they'll be invited up to the table to address us. And then we will go to folks that are wanting to address us online, remotely. And then at the conclusion of the public comments, we will go into our regularly scheduled meeting. You're welcome to stay, but you don't have to. So CPA has been here in Massachusetts since the year 2000, and it enables municipalities to do work with open space and outdoor recreation, historic resources, and community housing. About 195 cities and towns have adopted it. Springfield adopted it in November 2016 as a ballot initiative, and it was approved in 63 of 64 of our precincts. So we had a lot of support for it. The first allocation of CPA occurred in 2018. Just about a week ago, we made our 2023 recommendations to City Council and are happy to report that all 17 recommended projects have been approved. So the way CPA works, it is a 1.5% assessment on the property tax that people pay. The first 100,000 of value is exempt. Income eligible people can be exempted from paying it. The average homeowner pays $30. Every year, the state contributes to each CPA community, and they get their money from fees that are paid at all the registry of deeds when deeds and liens are filed. So next slide, please. So every CPA community has to have a committee that administers the program. In Springfield, we have 9 volunteer members, which is the maximum you can have. And they represent all CPAs across the Commonwealth must have people from the Housing Authority. Our representative is Willie Thomas. From the Park Commission, our representative is Clinton Harris. From the Conservation Commission, our representative is Juanita Martinez. From the Planning Board, and that representative is Gloria DiFilippo. And from the Historical Commission, and that's Judith Crowell. Springfield has chosen to have 4 additional members. 3 of them are neighborhood representatives nominated by the president of the city council. And those folks are Rhonda Sherrill and Yolanda Cancel and Stephen Bosworth. And the Springfield Preservation Trust, Inc. has a seat, and I am their representative. So CPA is run in Springfield by the Springfield Community Preservation Committee. We are responsible for making funding recommendations to the city council. It is though ultimately the city council, the legislative body, which has the authority to approve or deny. They can approve as recommended with less money is recommended, but neither the mayor nor city council can approve funding that doesn't come to them with a CPA recommendation. Each year, 10% of our funds must be set aside for open space and recreation, 10% for historic resources, and 10% for community housing. We may spend up to 5% on administration, and the remainder can be spent on any one of the 3 programmatic areas. All of our meetings are open to the public. 5 members constitute a quorum. Obviously, if we have issues, interests ourselves, we recuse ourselves from a vote. So the preservation plan was developed in 2018, and each year we hold a hearing and do tweaks to the plan. So what can CPA do? It's very limited. It can acquire, create, and preserve open space. It can acquire, preserve, create, rehabilitate, and restore recreational land. It can acquire, preserve, rehabilitate, and restore historic resources. It can acquire, preserve, create, and support community housing. And it can help with rehabilitation or restoration of open space or community housing that has been acquired or created by CPA. So that's somewhat of a restriction on those 2 areas. CPA money cannot be used for maintenance, and it cannot be used for programming. So we can help buy land for a soccer field. We can help build a soccer field. We can rehab a frumpy soccer field. We cannot mow or line the soccer field. We cannot pay for the coaches and the referees to run games on the soccer field. So in terms of forming a community preservation plan, it is to articulate an understanding of the needs, to inform both the applicant and the public of our goals, to establish criteria as to how we will evaluate applications, to establish a process and a timeline. And by the way, we've already set the deadline for 2024 CPA applications, which is February 29th, and to provide the forms. So next, please. So this is just sort of a timeline you can see. We're starting our hearing process now. We will be adopting the plan in either November or December. We'll be having a public workshop in February. Applications will be due in late February. We then spend March and April meeting with applicants. We start our deliberations in May and June, and then send the recommendations to the city council. And once we send it to the city council, we have no control over how long they wish to take care of reviewing the process. So these are the goals that are in the current plan. And these will probably continue being the goals unless someone mentions something that merits being added to it. So under open space and recreation, our goals are renovating small neighborhood playgrounds and green spaces, creating and improving community gardens, creating and enhancing opportunities for bikeways, walkways, trails on park and conservation land, controlling invasive plant species on park and conservation land, improving access to the Connecticut River and other water bodies for water-based recreation. Under historic preservation, our goals are preserve, protect, and restore historic properties and sites throughout Springfield, which have historic, archaeological, or cultural significance. Work to assist owners in adaptive reuse of historic properties, protect threatened properties, preserve the character of the city, and work to maintain the urban character. And lastly, under community housing, our goals are rehabilitating vacant, deteriorated houses to sell to income eligible buyers, providing first-time home buyer incentives to increase owner occupancy, especially in 2 and 3 family houses and in neighborhoods with low owner occupancy, and assisting income eligible owner occupants with repairs. This is just sort of a review of some of the projects that we have done over the first 5 years of CPA recommendations. We've assisted in developing 94 new housing units. We've assisted 136 first-time home buyers. We've done a variety of parks and playgrounds. One of the programs that we run in historic preservation is a historic homes program that helps owner occupants in any of our local historic districts. We have worked with the park department for restoration of historic resources on their property, such as the trolley pavilion on Sumner Avenue. We've worked with the Springfield Museums for restoration of various exterior elements of the George Walter Vincent Smith Museum. So under open space and recreation, we've helped do a variety of parks and playgrounds. We've created a walking trail around Venture Pond and 16 acres. We put up signage to promote the walking trails on 4 of our conservation areas. We've helped renovate a variety of neighborhood parks like Atwater Park and the McKnight Triangle. And lastly, under community housing, we've helped with the renovation of the Elias Brookings School to affordable housing. We're working with the developers of the Parsons Apartment House on Maple Street to take a long vacant building and renovate it for apartments. And we're working with Home City Development for building new townhouses up on Central Street. So the next steps are to hear public comment and to prepare the final plan, which we will be adopting probably by December. We plan to then have the applications ready probably in late January, and we'll be holding a workshop in early February. And once again, applications will be due on February 29th. And this slide just shows you where you can send your public comments, either by mail or by email, by October 31st. So at this point, we will start the public hearing, and there is no one sitting here live with us. So Karen, I turn it over to you.
Gloria, she may have people in the chat.
Well,
On our,
Karen,
yeah,
at this point, Karen, take over.
okay. Gloria, is there anyone with any comments in on the Facebook feed?
No, nothing.
Okay, all right. Then,
There is somebody, I saw somebody in the bottom there. I don't know who
Okay.
that is.
so what is first agenda item is the minutes,
No,
right?
no. We're now looking for public comment from the people who have logged in remotely.
Okay, yes, right, there isn't any. I do have one comment that I could read aloud if you'd like, that was sent to us by email.
And I see some faces too.
Well, I'm assuming that the folks that are on there are here to make comments.
Yeah, there is someone out there.
All right, okay. Who do we have? Okay, so Tina Quagliano Sullivan, welcome.
Hi, yes. My name is Tina Quagliato Sullivan. I am the Director of Disaster Recovery and Compliance under the Development Services Division for the City of Springfield. I've worked for the City of Springfield for close to 2 decades in varying capacities in housing, neighborhood stabilization, and community development. I have been a Springfield resident for 20 years, and I am a Springfield homeowner that pays into the surcharge that funds the CPC. I'm here today to provide public comment regarding Springfield's needs and opportunities. Specifically, I'm requesting that the Community Preservation Committee take the following things into consideration as you make funding decisions going forward. The first item I'm requesting the committee to take into consideration for future funding decisions is the current percentage of funding that has been allocated towards community affordable housing. A 2023 report by the Center for State Policy Analysis puts forth that the Community Preservation Act has thus far been a missed opportunity for funding affordable housing statewide. And the data demonstrates the majority of the funding has gone to support historic preservation, with community affordable housing getting the short end of the stick. The Community Preservation Act mandates that at least 10% of the community's allocation must go to community affordable housing. The recent report I've just referenced shows that Springfield CPC allocated just 11% to support community affordable housing, basically just meeting the bare minimum investment required by law. As the CPC is also required by the Community Preservation Act to study the needs of Springfield, we would urge the CPC to take into consideration the changing conditions in the real estate market and the current statewide and local affordable housing crisis. A 2021 analysis commissioned by former Governor Baker's office stated that Massachusetts needs 125,000 to 200,000 more housing units to meet demand by 2030. Springfield is not excluded from this crisis, as we have seen unsustainable rising real estate costs, including acquisition of real estate and rental costs, utility expenses, and overall cost of living increases in recent years. A study completed by the UMass Donahue Institute and Wayfinders found the overall shortage of housing units in the region, both rented and owned, was 11,000 in 2018 when CPA was enacted in Springfield, and that number is projected to rise to 19,000 units by 2025. This housing shortage, combined with rising inflation and interest rates, is causing a price spike for owners and renters across the city, increasing the cost burden on families and putting affordable rents and homeownership out of the reach of so many Springfield residents. While the CPC or the City of Springfield cannot solve these problems alone, we can all certainly be pulling in the same direction and increasing the percentage of CPC funding that goes towards supporting community affordable housing would certainly help by being part of the solution to reduce the housing cost burden that is crippling Springfield's residents. As the current housing crisis applies to home buyers, purchasers, and renters, I would also urge the CPC to take into consideration the current shortage of decent affordable rental housing units in Springfield and consider expanding their community affordable housing priorities to include the creation and/or rehabilitation of affordable rental housing into their community priorities. as it currently only appears to include affordable home ownership. The second item I'm requesting the committee reevaluate is the current $250,000 per project cap. The cap is not mandated by either the Community Preservation Act or the Community Preservation Ordinance, but rather was a voluntarily self-imposed cap put in place by the Springfield Commission. As two of the CPC's published goals are to acquire and preserve open space or recreational space, and to support community housing through acquisition and rehabilitation, I would urge the commission to reconsider the voluntary imposition of this cap. It's important to note that the current cap has been in place since 2018 and does not seem to have been reevaluated in any meaningful way since it was implemented 6 years ago. The current cap does not seem to take into consideration rising inflation, the significant rise in construction costs, and/or skyrocketing real estate costs and interest rates. Additionally, having such a low cap discourages developers from even applying for the funding, thus reducing the pool of applicants that CPC could even consider for funding awards. The final item I would like to ask the CPC to take into consideration in future funding decisions is the imposition of additional affordability restrictions on housing projects that come before you that are co-funded by other federal and state funding sources. The affordability restriction placed by long-standing affordable housing funders like the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development are long established and have long-standing public policy and research supporting them. Imposing further and often conflicting affordability restrictions on co-funded projects leads to uncertainty for housing developers, delays development, can cause long-term devaluation of the property impacted by the restrictions, and often just discourages developers from even applying for the funding. We would ask the CPC to rely on the long-standing affordability policies and restrictions that are already imposed by the majority funders of these types of projects. I want to conclude my comments, and I thank all of the appointees to the CPC for your volunteer work for Springfield. I thank you in advance for taking these items into consideration as you develop your community preservation plan and make future funding decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Jerry McCafferty from the Springfield Director of Housing. You're up.
Good evening. Hi, Jerry McCafferty, Director of Housing, also Springfield homeowner paying the surcharge for the CPA. Tina and I did not hear her comments before I prepared mine. So there is much that overlaps between what she and I are thinking about, but there are some other things I want to emphasize. As Tina mentioned, but I really want to emphasize the housing market in Springfield has shifted. So coming out of the pandemic, really the city's housing department has changed its focus because we have seen such a change in what's happening. It is really driven by this lack of housing units. Tina mentioned the UMass Donahue Institute is finding a gap of 19,000 units in the Springfield metropolitan area by 2025. What's happening there is, so we have some increased population, but more we have increased households, kids growing up, moving out. So the increased pressure on new households is meaning that we just simply do not have enough housing at all income levels. So affordable housing, moderate income housing, higher end housing, there are not enough units. And so there's tremendous demand. It is really driving pressure, and we've seen spikes in both rental and the for sale markets. So I also want to, note, Tina mentioned again that over time, there's been an 11% investment of CPA funds in housing. I note that this year it was 10%. It was exactly really the minimum amount. So I'd also like to advocate that more be spent on community housing. I think in particular around priorities, the city has applied regularly for down payment assistance. I think we still think of that as a priority and are hoping to apply for it this year. I will say we find we are less able to use that because there are fewer households that that meet the income qualification that can afford to buy a house. So it takes us longer to spend the money. We're really looking for the people that we're able to assist to do that. I think over time, so as we've seen the shift in the housing market, there's a little bit less of an emphasis on reclaiming vacant lots and rehabbing vacant homes. We are still doing that, but it feels like it's much more picking up the lingering ones as opposed to being the widespread crisis in vacancy and neighborhood destabilization that we had before. So while we're still working on that, we really see a need to think about production of new housing. So really, again, at the city level, there is a much greater emphasis on production of new units versus rehab. And I'd urge that the CPC consider that priority as well. I want to reiterate and emphasize the two pieces that Tina mentioned about lifting the cap on funding for housing projects in particular. I think housing projects tend to have many funding sources, and and the projects we're seeing are $15-20 million projects. It is a lot of work to come in and do an application for $250,000. Yet at the same time, housing production costs have really spiked. The cost of construction has gotten much higher in the last 2 years. So there's gaps in projects, and those gaps just aren't filled at the $250,000 level. So we have projects right now that are waiting for more funding rounds. They're partially funded, and they just sit and wait while there is a new funding source to apply for. And Tina mentioned not imposing affordability restrictions. I would suggest not imposing any other restrictions, not just around affordability, but again, most of the programs are very highly regulated. And so relying on those regulations has a uniformity that happens it's disruptive and inefficient when everyone needs to figure out a new restriction and how to make that work in a project. The next piece I just have one final thing I want to mention, which is around the fact that the city, one of the things that's new since last year, the city has created a housing trust. It lives with the Springfield Redevelopment Authority. There is a broad group of people that are the Housing Trust Advisory Committee. And I want to let you know that that group and the city are starting a broad planning process with support from NYU's Furman Center, which works with small and medium-sized cities to do housing planning. It's a very intensive process to provide us technical support. We're just starting that housing planning with a goal to have a plan by January of 2024. And I tell you that because as we're working with that plan, I would love to think that the CPA will be in concert with us, or the CPC will be in concert with us, thinking about how the CPC funds fit within that plan. And one thing I would suggest thinking about is whether it makes sense for the CPC to make a commitment of housing funds to the Housing Trust. I see of the 195 CPA communities, 100 use their housing funds to fund their community's housing trust. So that may be another way to add to the emphasis on housing. And with that, that's my comments. And I too want to just express my appreciation for all the amazing things you've funded and the great work you do as volunteers on this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCafferty. We have Diane's iPad. Could you please identify yourself? Or not? Okay, we'll go to Damien.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
It's Damien Phillips on 111 Dartmouth Terrace. and I'm calling about the notorious front porch of mine. With your CPA grant, when an homeowner signs the W-9 form for that grant of $30,000, that grant is automatically added, that $30,000 is added to the homeowner's income. It is also taxed by the IRS. I did contact the IRS and there are no exemptions whatsoever by any means that any of that is not taxable. So the problem I'm looking at is when you add that $30,000 that would come from the CPA into your regular income, it then knocks you out of any other projects that you can apply for because your income level has now exceeded your minimums. The other problem I'm having is contractors that do not want to work in the city of Springfield. They're just refusing to come up here. They're refusing to do work. And then when I find a contractor, Bob and Carol, I believe you're aware of this, that you guys have just put the brakes on any forward motion on my front porch repair. I'm on the understanding that you're afraid of when the porch does get dismantled and some of those parts do have to be stored in the garage for restoration or renovation, that you are afraid of those parts being stolen out of my garage. But prior to you being afraid of those parts being stolen out of my garage, the Historic Commission, the Preservation Commission has had no regard for what I have gone through living up in this neighborhood with traffic, shootings, accidents, robberies from my own property, generators, birds, breaking and enterings. You've had no regard for that whatsoever. And I think that's very sad that you don't care about what's happened since I've lived in this neighborhood, but you care about a piece of wood that's going to be stored in the garage. I need to know if the funding is going to be going into this front porch or if you're going to be kicking the brakes onto this project so it will not be done. Because I need to know one way or another how to progress with this porch because it's falling off. You know, it's been falling off. I have got through this process where I was accepted for the grant. The problem with the grant is, again, it's taxable. The problem with the grant is next year it's going to put me over income levels for any other funding for that property. We all know that this porch is going to cost more, a lot more than the $30,000, but nobody is willing to kick in and help. I've put countless thousands of dollars into this house to restore a house that was vacant, deteriorated, dilapidated by the previous owner. This house is now livable. It's actually nice inside. It's getting another coat of paint that's coming out of my pocket. Equipment's coming up to get the house to reach the tops of the house. That's also coming out of my pocket. No grant money, no city money for historic preservation at all on that end. All I'm asking for is, can you please help me get this front porch completed correctly? Take it off the house, take the rotten parts off, replace the rotten parts with good parts so this thing can be restored. Is this possible? Or I just need a direction at this point. You know, I got a contractor that's willing to come up, do this. They have time they want to schedule it. And now I don't know when it can be even scheduled. I don't even know if the money's available anymore. So if you can give me some insight to that, that would be great. The second thing is we have what we call the Glen up in McKnight. It's a city park. It's been neglected for over 30 years. You're talking about invasive species. There's tons of it down there. Not only do we have invasive species, we have homeless people who are going down there. They're conducting lewd acts of a sexual nature. They're also doing drugs down there. We have people walking around the neighborhood who are out of control. The police have been called numerous times, and they're not coming up to do anything. So first part, is there forward progress with the front porch? Second thing is anybody ever going to address that Glen to make it what it once was? Because it's just deteriorated beyond belief. I'm under the understanding that it's been let go for 3 decades now. So if I can get a response, I'd be very happy.
Thank you, Damien. We aren't responding to the comments. We're just listening to the comments at this point. So I'll reach out to you in the next couple days. We have iPad 62 for a comment. There's no name there. iPad 62. Okay, and there is one other person here with the last four digits of phone number is 1288. Do you have a comment? Apparently not. Okay, Gloria, is there anyone that has left a comment? On the,
No,
Or in the ch-
Karen, no comment or chat on the,
okay, thank you. This, I think this concludes it.
Okay, so if there's no one else that has comments they want to make, we will conclude the public hearing. Thank you for those people that took the time to attend virtually. And we will now go on with our regularly scheduled meeting. All right, so the first item on the agenda is the approval of the September minutes. If I could have a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
All right.
Second,
Thank you. All right, so we'll take a vote, starting with the folks that are here. So Juanita
Yes.
and Yolanda,
Yes.
Gloria,
yes,
Steve,
Yes.
Clinton,
yes,
and, I cannot see, is Judy, are you there?
Yes, I am, and I say yes.
All right, and is Willie there? And how about
No.
and Rhonda?
no,
Oh, okay, and Bob is yes. All right. So, just to talk, we've had comments. We will be incorporating those comments into the public hearing tonight, into the plan. And we will be talking about whether we want to make any changes with how we do CPA in the coming year. So that will be the major source of discussion in November. I just want to give a brief update on the ordinance amendment. For those of you that were at the last meeting, we voted to have some wording added to the city ordinance. We are one of the few committees where it doesn't say specifically that when someone's term is up, that they serve until their successor is appointed. And where we want to make sure that we don't look at some problem if that ever happens, because 5 of our members come from specific named bodies. And if there isn't a replacement speedily made, we could find that we have a long-term vacancy. I spoke with City Councilor Mike Fenton, who was the president of the City Council when CPA was passed and when the initial ordinance was put in place. And he said he would be happy to sponsor that at a City Council meeting. And that will probably occur later this month. He also added that he thought the 2-3-year term limit was unusual in terms of no other committees have that in their ordinance. So he's going to get the sense of City Council as to whether they think that should be changed at some point. But at least in the short term, he will be sponsoring the amendment that at least clarifies that someone whose term has expired continues until their successor is named. Okay. Karen, do you have any administrators updates for us?
I don't have any at this time, this month.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I think that concludes the meeting. It's rarely do we get out this early.
Wait, did we want to talk about Focus Springfield? That's on the,
Well, other than to say that I'm still interested and are doing a series with them on some of the projects that we have recommended over the last 6 years. But I haven't had a conversation because my guess is they are very busy until the election is done.
Okay, all right. Because I did mention it to Steve earlier, but I think he had to leave, so.
Yeah. All right, so unless anyone has any other information, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, second,
Second.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you so much. We'll see you at our meeting in November.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good
good
night,
seeing you.
everybody.
Night.
Good night, everybody. Good seeing you. Good job. Thank
See you
you.
all.
Thank you for joining us, our guests tonight.
Thanks, guests, for joining.
Thank you. Boy, what a difference when, because prior to COVID, remember, we would have